As an obstetrician and gynecologist, Dr. Annalisa Jones takes care of a lot of pregnant women. But that doesn't make having babies any less crazy.
Like, pregnancy's off the rails, right?
Right.
You come out of pregnancy, which is just a totally bizarre experience. And now you have this kind of new norm, but we have these blinders on and we don't really even acknowledge our own health.
Yeah.
Like, we don't even acknowledge maybe even what our bodies are telling us. And I sure as heck didn't until many years later when the wheels came off.
This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Today's guest, Dr. Annalisa Jones, is extra special to me because she actually delivered my 5th and final baby 6+ years ago. Since then, she's also become a friend. Today, she's going to talk about recovering from pregnancy both physically and mentally, which are really all wrapped up together anyway. She'll tell her story about how she learned to prioritize her own health after having 4 children, and also talk about how she helps her patients recover. And we'll even talk a little bit about my own recovery. Just a disclaimer right off the bat, this episode does not contain specific medical advice. As always, consult with your own physician about your own specific recovery after childbirth. What I would really like is for this to be a jumping-off point for a series about how you recover from childbirth. So if you have a story to tell about how you've healed your body and mind after giving birth through surgery, physical therapy, counseling, psychotherapy, or anything else, I'd love to hear your story. I can even share it anonymously if you don't actually want to be on the podcast. I just think we need to share our stories so we get a better idea of the wide range of what recovery looks like after giving birth and really just motherhood health in general. I'm not looking for just extreme stories about recovery, but also so-called normal recovery and what that looked like for you. Email me at whitney@howshemoms.com if you're interested in participating in this episode. Speaking of future podcast episodes, I want to announce a little change. Making these episodes, especially the crowdsourced think tank episodes that start with how she whatevers, takes a lot of time and research. But I also want to keep developing practical workshops as well, including an ambitious project for this summer that I'm just starting to hatch. And I'm also trying to take some classes and figure out how to do the businessy things like marketing so I can actually make this podcast sustainable. So I've decided to slow things back down again. Starting this month, I'm going to release 2 episodes a month instead of 1 every week. There will be 1 interview episode featuring just one mom and how she approaches a specific facet of motherhood. And then there will be 1 think tank episode with ideas from lots of moms. If that's just not enough episodes for you, the good news is that now that I've redesigned my website, it's easier than ever to listen to the 80+ episodes I've already released and find answers to whatever you're struggling with in motherhood by topic. To give you a sneak peek, this month's Think Tank episode will be called How She Celebrates Birthdays and will be released on February 16th. I'm also moving to Wednesdays. If you have a great idea or story for that episode, you can still sneak it in if you contact me by February 8th. I always love to hear your ideas. Again, you can email me at whitney@howshemoms.com. Okay, on to today's interview. I first asked Dr. Annalisa Jones to share her own experience with childbirth.
So I had Caroline when I was in my 4th year of medical school.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So okay. So 27. And so I had her in medical school. So I knew a little bit, like I had done my L&D rotation and I had seen babies born and all that, but I was still like first time mom, totally oblivious, like, medical school, and that's all I did. And then, also a baby. So I had her in med school, and I mean, first baby, it was really a blessing. It was easy. I bounced back pretty fast. I breastfed for, I think, 5 or 6 months, and then I started residency, and that was kind of the end of that. And so I had like a newborn essentially when I started residency. That was crazy town. I look back on those days, I'm like, how on earth did we do all of this? So I bounced back pretty fast after her, probably. I say that, I know we're not talking about mental health, but I say that, but going through medical school and residency, you kind of have blinders on. And I think honestly, a lot of moms do this, not even in the profession that I'm in, but we have these blinders on and we don't really even acknowledge our own health. Yeah. Like we don't even acknowledge maybe even what our bodies are telling us. And I sure as heck didn't until many years later when the wheels came off. But anyway, so kind of going through and then I was in residency, and obviously I was like practicing these things. And I had Gracie in residency and my third year residency, and that was something. I was, working 80-hour weeks. She was my little scrawny, like, growth restricted baby. I'd say she's made of Diet Dr. Pepper and peanut butter, and she is, but she's feisty, and I think it made her that way. And they ended up inducing me early because she wasn't growing. I mean, it was kind of a mess. And so as far as physically, I feel like again, probably bounced back pretty well from her. Mentally, not as much. Definitely struggled with some postpartum anxiety with her that I masked fairly well. Like, my doctor didn't even recognize it. I didn't even recognize it until, literally years later. I looked back and I was like, oh, that was not okay. That was not normal, and so that was hard.
Was that exacerbated by her size?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There was so much guilt. I remember people would say, oh, she's so tiny. And I would want to like punch them in the face because I felt this like guilt that somehow my body made her this way. Like that I didn't do something, or I was working too much, or I was not eating enough. And so she ended up small or whatever. I don't know if that's really true or not. I look back and probably it was, but I just felt such guilt. And then such like anxiety over making sure she got enough to eat, and is she growing? And she was also a really difficult baby. She didn't sleep much. She wanted to nurse constantly, and I was in residency, and so I was pumping. It was just nuts. Those were nutty days. My husband was in graduate school. It was insane. And we also had a toddler.
Right.
Yeah, at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Those, I look back and go, the Lord sustained us through that, because I don't know how we did that.
Yeah,
anyway,
it doesn't sound possible.
No, it was not smart. I remember those days of Gracie being an infant. I was in residency, so I would have to be at the hospital at 5 or 6 in the morning. And he would put us to bed, all of us to bed at 9 o'clock. He would study until Gracie woke up for her first feeding at 11 or 12. And then he would bring her to bed to nurse, and he would go to bed, and I would put Gracie back down. We did that for months. It was insane. Luckily, Caroline was a pretty easy toddler. Oh, and potty training on top of all that, too. I know. It's just insane. Yeah. So physically, Whitney, if I'm really honest, I did not pay attention for literally years until things really started going off the rails. And that is not okay. Well, I would definitely not tell anyone to do that.
Yeah. But don't you think most of us, in your experience with your patients, my youngest is 6.
Yes.
And I just finally fixed myself.
Yeah.
I think, because in those intense years of caring for other babies.
Correct.
You don't even, like you said, you don't even notice. Yeah. It's not that you're willfully putting yourself on the back burner, or consciously putting yourself on the back burner. It's just that you don't have time to think about it.
No, you don't even think about it. I tell people all the time, I'm 43, about to be 44. And I'm like, my 40s, I have enjoyed the past 3 to 4 years so much more. My 30s, my late 20s and 30s were a blur. I literally don't remember things about it, because it was just work and babies and more work and moving and jobs and school. And it was just crazy town. And I'm going, that, I kind of grieve that. There are whole parts of a whole decade of my life that I barely remember. And all those sweet, sweet years of having littles that I just go, gosh, I missed so much of that. But a lot of that is because I wasn't really, I was just going on autopilot. Just had set this pace when I was 23, and hadn't stopped to think, oh wait, is this sustainable? Is this healthy? Is this, and so I think, obviously that's a product of just kind of our culture and our generation. And I hope and pray that our, future generations, younger generations, our kids will take a minute and say, hey, maybe we don't have to have the pace that we think we do.
Yeah.
What is the end goal here? What are we trying to get to? So, and is that goal really that important to sacrifice our health? So
yeah. And like, what does a successful, fulfilling life actually look like?
Like, what does that mean
for me personally? Because
correct,
we have so many examples of what other people think it is,
and what our parents did, and that's different than us. Our world is so different than they went through, and they just worked a job for 40 years and then retired. And now, and I'm like, I don't know that I want to retire at 55 and play golf or bridge. I don't know. Like that sounds horribly boring.
I'm picturing you sitting there
playing bridge. I don't think, so it is. It's what does that mean for you? And then how do you get there? But also, how do you get there and not sacrifice the years that you have that are right now? But as far as physically, so going through as an OBGYN, I definitely got more anxious as I went because I think I saw more. Like, I saw more things go wrong. So I had Max when I was first year, second year out in practice. And then Violet came a couple of years after that. So she's my last, and she's my baby, but she's not a baby, she's 9. And my body was just done with that one. I remember being like tired and achy and not wanting my other children to even touch me while I was pregnant. And I thought, okay, we got to be done here. My recovery after her was much harder. I remember just being in a lot of pain, a lot of aches and pains.
Yeah.
My back hurt. I felt like I could literally feel my pelvic floor pulling on my low back. Like, I was like, this is not good. I thought, okay, I'm not doing that again. And as far as recovery,
and how old were you at that point?
I was 34.
Okay.
When I had Violet.
Okay.
And and I was working full time OBGYN. I'd take it back. I think I had gone to 3 days a week at that point. Yeah, but still, 4 kids.
Yeah.
And 3 days a week OBGYN, full time call, surgery, blah 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 blah.
Right.
Supporting a husband who was in ministry, which is a whole other, service art. And so we often laugh at ministry and medicine are very, very similar.
Absolutely.
Patients' needs, people's needs, all that stuff. So we were doing all of that. We were doing ministry, and so that was a lot. Physically speaking, at that point, I wasn't paying attention. I still wasn't paying attention. It's 34 still. I mean, I would exercise and we tried to eat right. We cooked a lot at home and but nutrition was just mostly, I grew up in the 90s. I just wanted to be skinny, if I'm really honest. Like when can I get into my, pre-pregnancy clothes faster, and so a lot of cardio, a lot of, restrictive diets and things like that aren't healthy. But yeah. So go back to your original question. Sorry. Definitely more anxiety, like thinking, oh, something's going to go wrong, and something's, and Violet had a couple of ultrasounds where she was measuring kind of weird, and I just was like, oh my gosh, she's going to, have some disability. She's going to be this or that, and even early on, I was convinced I was going to miscarriage. I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know. I kind of almost felt like my luck was running out. Like I had to have 3 healthy pregnancies, and surely this one was going to be terrible. Isn't that awful?
Well, but you're seeing so many.
And I had seen it. But then I remember my husband reminding me, hey, but, the majority of your patients end up with healthy babies and fairly regular deliveries. I'm like, okay, yes, you're right. I might have one bad one, but yeah, but those are the ones that stick with you,
Yeah.
So I was very blessed though. I did have really actually pretty easy, uncomplicated deliveries. So that was a real blessing. I was always, breastfeeding was a love-hate relationship. It was, it never came like I was always able to, but it was never super easy, super relaxed. I always, because I was pumping and always worried that they were getting enough and all that kind of stuff. So it was always a love-hate.
Well, and pumping is interesting too because not only is it a hassle and everything, but you're hyper aware of amounts.
Correct. Yes.
And when you're not pumping very often, who knows?
Right. So to go back to the anxiety part of it, I definitely had some anxiety with really everybody after Grace, and Violet's was to the point where I was breastfeeding and I would begin to have panic attacks when I would sit down to nurse, and my milk wouldn't let down. So I would be hugely full. And I mean, to the point of engorgement almost, but it wouldn't come out. So I looked this up. And so I talked to lactation consultants. They were saying, oh, well, they used to make this oxytocin nose spray that you can do. Yeah, back in the day, there's this nose spray, and the oxytocin would make your milk come down. Well, the problem is, so I looked it up, and that epinephrine or adrenaline blocks oxytocin receptors.
Oh.
So it was literally the adrenaline, the panic, it wasn't that my body wasn't producing oxytocin to make the milk let down. It was that my adrenaline or my epinephrine was blocking those receptors.
I've never heard of that. That's so interesting.
And so, because it's fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
If you're running away, the classic running away from a tiger. Why do we say that? I don't know. They always said that in medical school.
I've never met anybody who's
running
run away from
a tiger. But if you're fight or flight, you're not going to be sitting there nursing your baby. Like, your body's going, nope, shut it down. We got to go. So, but that's.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, so that I had to do a lot of like breathing and, kind of relaxing exercises to get my milk to let down for her for a while. It was tough. I don't miss those days.
Yeah.
I do not miss those days.
So you keep talking about your body going off the rails and the wheels falling off. What happened to your body physically?
I guess I was like 30. I was 39. Of course, this always happens around 40, right?
Right.
And this kind of affects you personally. I went to my friendly plastic surgeon.
When she says friendly plastic surgeon, she's talking about my husband. He discovered that the annoying mole she wanted him to remove was actually melanoma. Annalisa went back to get a bigger resection and then literally went to her 40th birthday party with stitches in her neck. Then she also started getting night tremors from anxiety.
So I have experienced a lot of like a combo of mental health and physical issues over the years.
And I've always struggled about even separating them because a brain is an organ.
Thank you.
It's not.
Well, and we're created whole people. Like we're body, mind, and spirit. Like you cannot separate them. In Western culture, we do, but I don't think you can. And I've experienced that in my own life. Did my stress and anxiety cause my cancer? I can't say that it didn't. I can't say that for whatever reason, my immune system didn't take care of those abnormal cells itself. I can't say that. And I'm not saying to everyone out there, your stress is going to make you get cancer. But we do know that it causes lots of things. And because of my lifestyle, because of the way that I was raised, and because of our culture, I had very much separated the two. And I thought, I'm mentally strong. I can barrel through this life and not take time to take care of myself, and I'll be fine. And my body said, no, just kidding, you cannot. And so between the melanoma and the tremors, at the same time, I had injured my hip. It had been injured, and then I water skied, and that just kind of put it over the edge. I was having terrible hip pain. Just all these things, literally all within 9 months. And So I started seeing a counselor. I had my melanoma taken care of. I started actually going to a dermatologist. Look at that. I called my sister and I said, I just need you to know, I need you to go get your skin checked because I just got diagnosed with melanoma. She goes, oh, I go every year. I said, what? I've never, here with my Irish blood and having grown up in Texas and lifeguarded my whole youth with terrible sunburns and tanning and all that, the tan culture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, growing up in the
buttering
South,
ourselves
even,
up instead of protecting.
Yeah, so terrible. Here, I've never even been to the dermatologist. Ridiculous. Anyway, started going to the dermatologist, started seeing my primary care doctor, actually got my cholesterol checked, actually, started doing PT for my hip. Luckily, it was not as surgical. I didn't have to have surgery, but it was an injury, and I had to have a steroid injection and do PT. And so now onto the physical part. As I was doing PT, my PT said, I think you need to do some pelvic floor PT. And I was like, it's not my pelvic floor, it's my hip. I am an OBGYN. This is embarrassing that I'm like, she goes, yeah, but it's connected. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. So sure enough, my pelvic floor was totally shot. And I had known this too for a while. I've not been able to run in years. Right. Let's say that. And so I started doing PT, started doing pelvic floor PT. And then when I kind of graduated from PT and my hip was PT worthy, like I started going to a trainer, and she was working with me as a kind of a post PT training. And then she was having me, and I mean, I was fairly fit as a young person. Like I played volleyball in high school. I was fairly fit. She started having me do some exercises that I thought, oh, I can do that. I could not do certain like lunges, like literally was falling over. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have no strength in my hips, my glutes, like basically my whole lower body was a mess. Like my butt was just like sliding down the back of my body. Like there was nothing there. I'm like, no wonder I have low back pain. No wonder I have all these things. I have no strength. And so she really started working with me on strengthening, and I've been doing that ever since. It's probably been 2 or 3 years now that I've been really into kind of strength training. Sorry.
No, spam.
Oh, spam.
I should put it somewhere that doesn't.
So that's one thing I'm really passionate about in women is strength training, and for a few reasons, I'll jump into like a professional mode now. But when you lose muscle mass at increasing rates after 40, and even more so as we start really getting into the perimenopause time, and muscle mass is so important. It is the most insulin sensitive tissue in our body. So if you are concerned about sugar issues, as we get a little older, everybody complains about that pooch in the middle. That's insulin. It's because our bodies become less insulin sensitive over time, and our bodies store fat in the middle. So there aren't very many things that we can do to battle that other than cutting out carbs out of our diet, but then also building muscle, because our muscle is the most insulin sensitive tissue in our body. But then you're protecting your joints. A lot of us end up with joint pain and joint injuries as we age, mostly because our muscles aren't protecting it. And so we don't have that muscle mass to do that. But then also hormones. There was a study that came out a few months ago, that was talking about strength training in perimenopause, and they drew hormone panels on a group of ladies. They did a 12-week resistance training with them and drew their hormone levels at the end, and there was a significant increase in hormone levels.
Oh, I was just doing it to stop osteoporosis.
Oh, well, that too. Exactly. So strength training, it stresses your bones. It makes your bones replenish themselves. And so I'm a big proponent of like actually strength training. I mean, cardio is awesome, and we know that. We know the benefits of cardio workouts. But strength training, whether it be actual weights or whether it be body weight training, I mean, rock climbing all those things, and then or resistance training is all really, really important to build those muscles and to keep your muscles strong. So that's another proponent of that.
So what are some of the common injuries that you see from actual childbirth that then need either physical therapy or surgery?
Or surgery. Yeah. So I think I have two categories. I have ones that are like actual injuries, and then I have ones that I would just say are kind of consequences.
Okay.
So they're not really an injury per se, as it is just, this just happens, you know? So I would say injuries are going to be like anal sphincter tearing, urethral tearing, if you have a C-section and you end up with something where your muscles are we actually have to cut the muscles. So we don't usually cut muscles the way that your muscles are. They're like a curtain, like on a stage, you know, and so we just kind of open them and separate them in the midline when we do a C-section. But there are emergent cases where you actually do have to cut the muscles. So that would be a trauma. That would be like an injury. And those things probably, they need to be surgically repaired. Obviously you may need more therapy, things like that.
And are those done pretty immediately?
Sometimes. So an anal sphincter tear will be repaired immediately, but may need to be revised because sometimes it's really hard to get that to heal completely correctly
and still be
at the time
right?
of delivery.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon that we go back at 6 weeks and say, okay, now we're probably going to need to go see a pelvic floor specialist or a colorectal surgeon if you're still having issues. Sometimes those issues don't pop up until much later, and you go, yeah, so I had what we call a 4th degree tear, which tears all the way through the anal sphincter. I had a 4th degree tear. They repaired it. I was fine for a while, but as I've gotten older and weaker, whatever, now I'm having problems, you know, whether it be painful bowel movements or anal incontinence or whatever. Then there's things that I think are just kind of, I would say, just natural like consequences of having babies, and I would say that's probably the more common one. Actual true injuries, I would say, are rare. But just kind of, this is just what happens when you have babies, you know, that isn't always pleasant. And so, and it's not anything that you necessarily have to live with, but it just kind of happens. So those are kind of like the diastasis recti, pelvic floor, you know, relaxation, whether that be like a rectal relaxation where you're having trouble passing your bowels, or like a urethral relaxation or bladder relaxation where you leak or you feel frequency and urgency all the time, those kinds of things, like overactive bladder kind of things.
And I didn't realize I had both. I just thought I was normal. Like the urgency part.
Right.
And guess what? I can sleep now. I sleep deeply now because I always low-key had to pee.
Yes.
And I did not realize.
You probably weren't emptying completely.
No, I think there was some of that, and there was some of just, I felt urgency when there was barely any in there. Yeah. And so I didn't realize that sleep was connected to that. I just thought I was a light sleeper because I had kids and I was listening, whatever. The first time I like slept deeply after that surgery, I thought I was like waking from the dead. What just happened to me?
Yeah.
Like it felt like coming out of anesthesia almost. Yes. It was so deep. I was like, what was that? Yeah. And I feel so good. It was amazing.
That's so good.
So anyway, that was a tangent. But
no,
I had no idea that those were connected.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And I just thought, I just had forgotten how long you can hold it and not need, you just forget. Yeah.
Well, and after pregnancy's off the rails, right? You come out of pregnancy, which is just a totally bizarre experience. And now you have this kind of new norm. And then there are some things that you just kind of go, that's just going to be how it is. Like they've done studies. Women after babies do not ever sleep as deeply as they did before. Like that's studied, right? Whatever the reason, it just is. And so you just kind of go, okay, well, that's just kind of how it is.
Right.
And, you know, or after breastfeeding and I don't have any boobs left, you know, that's just how it is. But then there are things that and I say this to my patients all the time, it's not necessarily that there's anything pathologic about this. This is not like something horribly wrong. This is not life-threatening, but you don't necessarily have to live with it either. Like, we can fix it. And so, so yeah, whether it's pelvic floor, just as like I was, it was just weak. I just had no strength in basically my whole lower body, and I was just walking around on my bones. Like, it was just awful. And so that took PT and strength training and all of those kinds of things. Or whether it's true pelvic prolapse, like where things are literally like falling out, that may take a surgery, or it may take more PT. You had your sling done, which I love a good sling. Man, I used to do them. I miss it. But yeah, they are so effective, and it made total game changer.
Oh my gosh.
I know. You're like beaming. You're like, I love my sling so much.
I know. It's my favorite possession.
And no one can take it from me. Diastasis. I feel like this one's been a big topic, because again, this is kind of a natural consequence oftentimes of having babies, but it's not necessarily something you have to live with. And you can definitely have it fixed, definitely have it repaired, and you just feel so much better. I think we have to be careful when we talk about, I feel like there's some push to really jump on these things and not allow our bodies to have natural healing time. So I've had patients coming to me wanting to do pelvic floor PT at like 3 weeks postpartum. Oh. I'm like, whoa, hey, slow your roll. Let's let your body relax. And I think, if I'm really honest, I think that's a reflection of our culture. Mm-hmm. It's the pendulum. It's the other end of things.
It's the stupid genes.
Yes, it's the genes. It's the, oh my gosh, now I have to focus on my recovery. And I'm going to get this recovery done as fast as possible. And I'm like, whoa, there is a time period for this, I mean, we're talking about soft tissue here. We have to let it heal. We have to let's see what it does on its own. I mean, women have been having babies for millennia. And so there is a certain component of it that just repairs itself. And so let's see where we are at 3 months. And if at 3 months you're still having problems, we can definitely do some PT or a surgical consult. But let's give it a minute. Let's let it rest and heal and see where we end up. Because if we start jumping in to repair something that's not fully healed yet, what is that going to, that's not going to do good either.
Right. And it's further complicated by future plans.
Yes.
Because, I mean, that's why I didn't get fixed for so long. Correct. Because I didn't know. And maybe 3 weeks after you have a baby, you're like, oh, I'm never doing this again. Right. But you don't know. I mean, that's a really bad time to make decisions.
With full abdominoplasties, pregnant again. And I'm like, oh, somebody should have tied your tubes at the same time. Oh my goodness. That was, yeah. So I usually tell people, let's see where you are. Talk about future fertility needs. And that's pelvic floor. That's even plastics. So we start, we're talking about labiaplasty and kind of vaginal pelvic repair just for cosmetic appearance. I usually tell people, hey, let's wait till you're done with babies, because you never know what's going to happen. And I'd hate for you to pay for this whole repair and rejuvenation, and then you end up having a 9-pound baby and it's shot, and here we are again. So let's just hold off, and then we can put everything back together later.
When that does happen, is it harder than to put it back together? Like if you've had
I would say, yeah, because it's just going to mess up what you already did. You already made it look really nice, and now it's got a big tear in the middle of it. So you might as well wait and then do it all later. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway. So, yeah. I think plastics are an interesting part of this conversation. And I'm going to say this not just because your husband's a plastic surgeon, but I think that's a really interesting part of not just physically healing, but physically feeling good. I think that, some people, they breastfed their 5 kids and their boobs are just like fried eggs on their body. And they're like, this doesn't feel like me. This doesn't feel like, it doesn't match the rest of them. It just looks weird. And I'm like, go get your boobs done. Get some new boobs. Or they have that, the belly hanging over their C-section scar, or they don't like their C-section scar or whatever. And I'm like, get it fixed.
Yeah, like
feel better.
Loose skin.
Yeah. And I mean, there's some of that you can work at and help and reshape your body with exercise and diet, but you can't grow new boobs. Like you can't, and you can't get rid of a bad C-section scar. Only a good plastic surgeon can do that. So those are things that I think are important for us to feel our best. And I definitely put that in a category similar to these other things that we're talking about, because yeah, you could live with it, but you don't have to.
Yeah. David always laughs at like how people have such barriers against plastic surgery, and yet they spent like years of their lives in braces.
Yes.
And he's like, it's all cosmetic.
It's all cosmetic.
But like, which one is actually more invasive? Like,
right.
Like, and he's not against orthodontia either.
No, of
but
course.
It's just a cultural thing that.
Or thousands of dollars on face creams. I'm like, why don't you just go get the Botox? Like, I mean, or whatever. I mean, we pick and choose, right? We pick and choose what we are comfortable with, but I do. I'm like, go. It's funny. This year has been interesting with people kind of coming out of the pandemic and getting, kind of feeling a little more normal, but at the same time making really big changes. I've seen so many I swear at least 4 times a day somebody has a new job. I've seen really sad things like a lot of divorce and things like that, but also in a lot of new relationships, people getting out of toxic relationships, but a lot of people making big changes on their body, and it's been really exciting. I've seen a ton of like massive weight loss. Like, oh, well, I was at home working, and so I decided to I bought a Peloton and I lost 75 pounds. And I'm like, I don't even recognize these people. They come in for their annual exams, and I'm like, oh my gosh, weight loss surgery, tons of weight loss surgery. And then the subsequent plastic surgery for their skin removal. And I mean, I've just seen women making incredible changes in their lives for the better. And it's been really, with all the negativity and yuck of the pandemic, it's been actually really encouraging to see people making really positive changes, and finally saying, okay, I'm done. I'm doing it now. Well, and you kind of did that. Like, okay, it's time, and whether that was reflective of the pandemic or not, I think that the time that we're living in lends itself to take a minute and go, what are we waiting for? Do we let's move to, we've always wanted to move to France. We're moving to France or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think that this time is really interesting, and I see people making really big changes.
Well, and like you were talking about getting used to your new normal, it's really easy to just sit back and do nothing and realize, oh, well, I can handle it. And that's where I was just like, well, I've lived with it for this long.
It's fine.
Whatever. It's fine. Yeah. Okay, now I can like have spontaneous dance parties with my kid. My quality of life, I mean, through the roof, like crazy. And so I just want to shout to the rooftops, which I am. I will be shouting to the rooftops this podcast. I love that I have a platform to shout through. But it's just amazing how much I was willing to live with for so long. Like I was ridiculously bad. Like I couldn't even be around the house without a pad on. Oh my gosh. It was ridiculous what I was living with. I had my own diaper genie. I probably won't put this in maybe I will put it in the podcast. I had my own diaper genie in my bathroom because I was just
going through pads.
Like a baby. I was like totally incontinent,
Oh my gosh.
And I lived like that it happened with my first baby.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's crazy.
Do you feel like it was, and maybe not for you personally, but I think as women, sometimes there's this badge of honor that we oddly give ourselves when we push through. And I've seen it in my patients. I've seen it a lot in colleagues where it's like, but I'm fine. I'm strong. I can handle this. I can do it. I'm like, but why? Because you obviously are miserable. And whether it be physical, mental, whatever, like, why are you doing that? Why? What, again, going back to our original thought of like, what is the goal? What are you accomplishing? What is that? What does this give? Does this give you value as a person to, you know, to be miserable? And
yeah, it's the whole martyr mentality too, that like I feel like the generation before us even had that more of that.
Yeah,
like, well, it's just what motherhood is.
This is what motherhood is, and this is our cross to bear.
Right.
Like,
right.
I'm like, really?
Yeah, and for me it wasn't
terrible.
so much that as
no, I wouldn't think that you would.
It was more like I don't have time.
I don't have time.
Yeah. Like I'll get to it. You know, I don't have time, but it freed up so much time.
Yes.
Surprise.
Imagine that. Yeah. I know. And I think
and mental load.
Yeah. Oh, mental load.
Like, where's the bathroom going to be? What do I have to do to prep to go out of the house? And,
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, and thinking about just even like activity and exercise. You know, I have women who say, well, I want to lose weight, but I have this bad knee, or I have a hip that I haven't gotten fixed, and so I can't exercise, or I can only do very specific exercises that are not readily available to me, you know, and so it just...
and then it cycles and cycles and cycles until you're off the rails.
Right.
The last thing Dr. Annalisa Jones and I talked about is how we as a culture can take better care of new moms.
I wish I could do more. You know, the postpartum appointment's so short. Now, I will say American College of OBGYNs came out with a statement a few years ago saying that we really do need to be touching base with new moms more than just the 6-week visit, you know, and even more if they have risk factors, whether it be mental health risk factors or physical risk factors, or if they have complications. And so for a just regular standard vaginal delivery, I will see them at the 6-week visit, but then I will also bring them back at 6 months, and we just do a regular annual exam. And so that's twice in that first postpartum year. And then I also always tell them, you can always call, please call. Here's the list of things you can call for, you know. And so we really make our office and our practice very accessible for our ladies. If they have anything else, we make a 3-week appointment. If they have already pre-existing mood issues or past mood issues, we do a 3-week kind of mental health check. If they had a C-section, we see them at 2 weeks. If they had a bad vaginal tear or those kinds of things, we see them at that 2 to 3 week mark as well. So more often in that first 6 weeks. We offer all kinds of resources for breastfeeding support and all that stuff. But I can't say enough, though. I can only do so much, you know, and I can only, because I have hundreds of patients.
Yeah.
The importance of having a support system, a community. And I'll tell this story. When I was struggling with breastfeeding my Violet, and I had finally actually admitted to myself that this was an anxiety issue. This wasn't a physical issue. My best friend has her son is just a few months younger than Violet. And so she was also nursing. And there would be times that I would just go to her house, and we would sit around, and our older kids would play, and we would sit and watch TV and nurse the babies. And it was just the sweetest time. There were even times that I would sit down to nurse Violet, and it wasn't working, and I would call her or I would text her, and she would just start talking to me, just take my mind off of it. And so the importance of community, I think, is something that our culture is lacking so much of in that postpartum period. We don't have our mom living in our basement. Sometimes that's good, but we don't have our sister living next door who's also nursing a baby. We don't have that community of shared experience. And I think it's the shared experience that's so important, whether that be an older generation of women who are saying, oh yeah, that happened to me. Yeah. Right? You know how comforting it is. And talk about removing guilt.
And this is where I want to end this episode, with the idea that we moms as a community can be the best healing force after childbirth. Sharing our experiences and figuring out what healing looks like for different moms. Supporting each other through our physical and mental recoveries, even decades after having kids. Whether or not you have a solid local community, I hope you consider How She Moms as part of your community, a place to learn from and share experiences with other moms. Thank you so much for listening to the How She Moms podcast and for being part of this community. There are so many other ways for you to connect and hopefully also contribute. I share tips and ideas regularly on Instagram and Facebook at How She Moms. You can find past episodes and other resources at howshemoms.com. And you can always just email me directly at whitney@howshemoms.com. Special thanks to my own wonderful mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.